my god, the light is blinding me. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Jamie and today I'm going to be talking about everything I read in May. If you've been following me for the past few months, you've probably noticed that I sound like a broken record. I've been bitching, whining, complaining, moaning about how I just haven't had a good reading month. Everything I pick up is uninteresting, or I just don't have a lot of thoughts about it. And I'm not a no thoughts, head empty kind of reader. I really do enjoy thinking critically or breaking down a story. I think my camera is having a hard time focusing on the colors because I have the orange in the background and then the yellow light. So if my skin tone looks weird throughout this entire video, I'm so sorry, but I don't know how to fix that. We're gonna start with The Graveyard Shift by ML Rio. I saw this in a Bookstagram post. I'm trying to be more active on Bookstagram. So I saw this in a Bookstagram post about mushroom or fungi horror because I don't know about y'all, but mushrooms kind of scare me. I love eating them. They also scare me because fungi are horrifying. In this post, they also recommended What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher, which I love the Sworn Soldier series. I can't wait for the next one. And this novella is by ML Rio, who wrote If We Were Villains, which is one of my favorite books. So I had high hopes for The Graveyard Shift. This is a horror novella. It is about 5 people who work on or near a college campus, and for one reason or another, they are all up in the middle of the night. And these 5 people know each other because they are smoking buddies, and they all meet at this old abandoned churchyard, which is the only place on campus that you're allowed to smoke. The premise of the novella is that it takes place chronologically through shifting perspectives across one night. It is one contained night. These 5 people find a fresh grave in an abandoned churchyard, and the rest of the book is just trying to figure out who dug the grave, what's going in the grave, why they dug it. It was fine. It was 3 stars. I like short novella or short audiobooks while I do chores, so I can kind of listen to them as I work. Helps me focus on laundry and stuff. And it was one of those books where it's like, I listened to it in a day while I did laundry, and that's about it. It almost felt like chapters were missing. So each character gets 2 perspective chapters, but since it's chronological, some characters' stories end at like 1 in the morning, and some of them end at like 10 in the morning. We have some characters where their stories just kind of end, but then we have other characters where they focus so much on giving them a happy ending and like answering all the questions on how this is a happy ending. It was just kind of weird that some characters were not given a denouement, as they like to say, while others were. And then the very end, the actual last chapter, it's obviously doing some sort of like ambiguous, open-ended, mysterious line, but to me, I didn't feel like there was a good foundation for the rest of the story for that open-endedness to feel justified. I was in my nonfiction girl era because I read 3 nonfiction books. The first one was Eco Anxiety by Heather White. The reason I picked up this book is because I was having a bit of a freak out, but I was making lunch and every ingredient I touched was in some sort of plastic. Like the tomatoes came in a plastic carton, the broccoli is in a plastic package, the cheese is wrapped in plastic, but because it's not a resealable plastic, we then put it in another plastic bag to keep it fresher longer. And all of these are like single-use plastics that I just throw out at the end of the day without even thinking about it. And so then I started freaking out that I was the sole reason the earth was dying and I'm not doing enough to be eco-friendly. I need to like completely change my life to make it more sustainable and yada yada yada. And I went to Instagram to try and like calm myself down, like distract myself. And the first post I saw was from a local bookstore promoting a book signing about this book called Eco Anxiety, and it's like how to stay sane during the climate crisis. And I was like, the universe is speaking to me. So I immediately went out and bought it. I don't know if I'm happy with the book itself. I personally didn't get much out of it. The whole point of the book is to find ways to make little life changes over time so that it snowballs, and that way you're making more sustainable life choices but not burning out by trying to change everything all at once. But the book is kind of stuck between telling the reader or whoever it's okay that you can only take baby steps and a baby step is better than nothing, but then also listing horrific statistics about how the climate is dying and how the world is falling apart and how we are killing our planet. So it's kind of stuck between both of those extremes. I do think the author has a really good idea about the snowball effect and making little life choices and doing one green thing a day. She actually has an organization called One Green Thing. The book does have a lot of great resources on different foundations and organizations, which is great. A lot of the statistics I already knew because I doom scroll all day. I did find some ideas for what to do to change my sustainability, but those were ideas I was already planning to put into place, like going to farmers markets, finding organizations in my area, that kind of stuff. The next two nonfiction books I read are by Caitlin Doughty. If you do not know who Caitlin Doughty is, I am so glad I get to introduce her to you because she is one of my favorite creators, like, ever. I followed her for, I don't know, years, 10 years, I don't know. Caitlin Doughty, also known as Ask Mortician, started her channel by giving open and honest answers about the funeral industry, how a body is prepared. Her big thesis is information and honesty will help people understand grief and help them through some of the most difficult times of their lives. They've lost a loved one and now they are being slapped in the face by the funeral industry for hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. Caitlin just wants to educate the population about their different options when it comes to burials, body disposal, funerals. She also makes amazing educational videos about various topics that are usually death-centered that she makes with so much heart and tact and respect for just everything that she does. I love her. She has, I think, 3 books out right now. I read 2 out of her 3 books. The first one was Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, which is her memoir about being a crematory operator in her early 20s. This book really confronts death in the eye, and we see it through Caitlin's lens as she understands death. We learn about how she saw it as a child, her first introduction to death, and then unlearning her, not prejudices, but like preconceived ideas about grief and death, and learning to respect it, learning to understand other people and other cultures' grieving processes. It's amazing. I truly loved everything about it. And I think the best thing about Caitlin is, even though she's very respectful and tactful and tells these stories with such grace, she also adds like a little bit of humor in to lighten the mood, but it's always a respectful amount of humor. It's just a very wonderful look into a very dark subject, and I recommend it to everyone. I will say it does obviously talk about death, and there are a lot of different kinds of death it talks about, such as death of children, suicide, other kind of things like that. So if that's an issue for you, maybe don't read it. The next book I read was From Here to Eternity by Caitlin Doughty, and this is an anthology. I guess is the best way to describe it. It's also kind of a memoir, but Caitlin travels the world to various different cultures to explore different burial techniques, different cultural burials, and just like experiencing death culture in other countries. She goes to like, I think it's Georgia, like Georgia the state, not the country Georgia, where human composting is trying to be legalized, and there's like one organization that is doing more of an eco green burial, human composting, no shrouds, no pine boxes, no, just straight in the dirt composting kind of thing. She travels to, I think it's been a while since I've read it, but the Philippines, I think, where we learn about walking mummies or zombie mummies, which is just a cultural thing for, for the Philippines, not the Philippines, like a certain subculture in the Philippines. We travel to Bolivia, where we learn about these magical mummified heads who give you prophecies or are psychic. It's a wonderful look into other cultures, but like a specific niche of other cultures, which I just find very interesting, and I think very, very worth the read. I highly recommend these books. Next, I read Blood on Her Tongue by Johanna van Veen. She's a Dutch author, so I hope that's how you say it. It might just be Joanna van Veen. I judge this book by its cover because I don't typically fall head over heels for sprayed edges, but I'll see if I still have the picture. These sprayed edges were so cool. They were like blood dripping down the pages. I thought that was amazing. Blood on Her Tongue is a gothic horror novel. We begin with our main character, Lucy, going to visit her twin sister, Sarah, after Sarah has started to be a little less sane, a little less coherent. We learn that a bog body was found on Sarah's property, and Sarah is a very studious person. She loves entomology, she loves all things macabre, morbid, and she really, really wanted to see the autopsy of this bog body. Now, this body was found buried upside down with stakes driven through its body and a stone shoved in its mouth. If you know anything about vampire lore, you know something is up with that body. And shortly after coming into contact with the body, Sarah becomes a bit weirder. She's not feeling herself. She's very ill. It's very gothic horror. It's very atmospheric. I loved this story. It has a cool twist on the vampire myth. So if you're kind of done with vampires in the more like modern mythology, the modern canon of vampires, this is a really good twist on it. So I highly recommend reading it. I will say, I always forget that like zombie books and vampire books are just cannibalism with a monster filter on them. And cannibalism is something that I cannot, most body horror I can't do, cannibalism I really, really can't do. I really try not to cross that line. I was gagging at this, but I'm pretty much a lightweight when it comes to horror. So I was pretty okay with it until we got to like finger eating and I was telling my sister about it, and she loves, we are complete opposites when it comes to reading. She loves cannibalism. She, not doing it. She doesn't like doing it. She loves it as like a theme in horror and all of that. So she really, really wanted to read this. And as I was telling it to her, I was like, actually, it's really gruesome to me, but you probably would not bat an eyelash at it. Like, we're just like that different when it comes to our tastes. There are two things I wanted to point out about this book that I really, really enjoyed just in the writing style. First thing, it's a very touchy-feely book. It's very atmospheric, like the actual atmosphere. I could 100% imagine myself being there. But then she just kind of lingered on these details about like sensations. For example, she's reading a book and it has one of those, you know, these built-in ribbons, and she puts it in her mouth and is like talking about the feeling of the ribbon being wet on her tongue. And I was like, you get me, because I also sucked on ribbons as a kid. Like I totally understand that sensation, you know? It spoke to me, right? The second thing is one of the biggest conflicts, one of the biggest obstacles of this whole thing is that Lucy wants to prove that Sarah is not insane. She doesn't want Sarah to be committed into an asylum, but they keep bringing up Sarah's previous temporary insanity. And we're given enough detail that we know exactly what happened, but not until the very end do we know exactly what happens in writing. We get some flashbacks, but it always feels like we're talking around it, like we're beating around the bush. And I loved that. I love that we weren't outright told word for word exactly what happened immediately, because it really just felt like there was this unspoken thing that was hanging above this whole narrative, this like known event that everybody knows of but doesn't want to talk about. I'm very easy to impress. Voices in Giant Cities by R. Cliff. I do have a physical of this, but it's downstairs and I'm too lazy to go get it. This is a poetry collection that I found in a local bookstore. It is by a local author. I'm trying to be more supportive and like actually buy books by local authors from indie bookstores. Here's the thing, I really want to be a poetry girl, but I feel like such a poser every time I read poetry because I've studied books. I've studied like story analysis. So, I mean, there's rule breakers and there's things that don't fit the mold, but for the most part, I can break down a story. Poems are different. I have absolutely no idea what makes a good poem, what makes a bad poem, what the rules are, what the rules aren't, what rules are normal to break and what rules are not normal to break. And here's the thing, when you ask about poetry, everyone always says, well, there are no rules. That's the beauty of poetry. But there are, because there are poems that are good and there are poems that are bad and there's objectives and subjectives and it's a whole thing and I hate it. I desperately want to be a poetry girly, but I really don't know anything about it. So that being said, I'm going to critique these poems, but just know that I do not have a background in poetry. I don't understand it. These critiques are baseless. So the poetry collection is about the author's travels to various cities, like being a single person, not single as in like relationship, but like a single entity in this giant city like London or Edinburgh or LA or New York or Paris. I believe that the whole thesis around the poem was I am, because there's a quote in the, like, what is it called? The epitaph? There's a quote at the beginning of the book of another person talking about the importance of I am, and I'm too lazy to go get the book and read the quote. So I think that's supposed to be the thesis, but it does get very repetitive because almost every poem starts off with I am, and almost every poem is supposed to be like the narrator is an object or a building or an experience. Unfortunately, it does really remind me of all of the like writing classes I've had where the like writing exercise at the beginning of class was something along the lines of write from the perspective of this lamp, or write a short story about what's happening in this photo. And then also the repetition of I am felt almost like a riddle. You know those riddles that are like, I have no eyes, but I can see. What am I? Those kind of riddles. So the combination of the writing exercises and riddle feeling made it seem very juvenile, made it feel very novice. That's the word I was looking for. It made it feel like this is somebody's first attempt at poetry. But like I said, I don't know anything about poetry. Alrighty, this might get into some ranting territory. I read Alana and In the Hands of the Goddess by Tamora Pierce, or Tamara Pierce. I don't know how to say her name. These are two books of a 4-book series. Yeah, 4-book series from the 80s. I feel like I have to preface this because I know that these books are a bit older. They were written by someone of a previous generation. Not only that, they are highly influential of many people's childhood. They are like well known as being people's first foray into fantasy. The first book was fine. The premise of the entire series is that Alana is a young girl with a twin brother. She's, I don't know, from a highborn family. And she is really into sword fighting and horseback riding, and she's really brave and wants to be like this strong knight. And her brother is not into that stuff. But unfortunately, her brother is being sent to like night school. They have other words for it. I'm gonna call it night school. And she's being sent to sorcery school. Alana comes up with this idea that her brother will go to the sorcery school and she will pretend to be a boy and go to night school. Her plan is to do the entire 8 years of night school as a boy, hopefully not get caught, prove herself, and then at the very end, after she's been knighted, reveal that she's been a woman this entire time, because there have been maiden warriors, but they're not common, and I guess they're not allowed anymore. So she wants to prove that she can do this as a woman. And then obviously, as she's learning to be a knight, her being a woman in a woman's body gives unique challenges. The first book was fine. The first book, Alana starts out as a 10-year-old, and my biggest critique is that the entire book felt very rushed and episodic, because I thought this would be like the first year of training. It's the first 4 years of training. So Alana starts off as 10, ends up 14 at the end of this book. And we learn that night training is very monotonous. It is just like get up, do your lessons, do your exercises, eat, go to bed. So like we can kind of brush through, montage through a lot of the night school and only pick up at the exciting parts. But the pacing of it just felt really weird because there was so much going on. It was super episodic. It would just be months of nothing and then suddenly another adventure. And a lot of the times we weren't privy to how much time had passed in between. And on top of that, they're trying to set up a big bad. It felt a little rushed. Other than that, it was pretty par for the course for a middle grade novel about a little girl pretending to be a boy. I was listening to it through audio, and the audiobook wasn't chapter by chapter. It was just 4 sections at seemingly random intervals. And so there were some weird perspective switches that may have had chapter headings explaining that they were switching perspectives, but the audiobook didn't do that. So all of a sudden we'd just be in like Jonathan's narration, and I was super confused. All right, I liked where it was going. The second book came in on Libby, so I listened to the second book and I hated it. I viscerally hated it. And I'm so sorry if these books are near and dear to your heart, if they like introduced you to reading, but this book was so bad and just made me so uncomfortable. The audiobooks are 5 hours. I don't know about the other ones, but the first 2 are around 5.5-ish hours. The first book was from the time she was 10 to the time that she's 14. The second book is from the time that she's 14 to the time that she's 18. It's the same amount of time in the same amount of hours. The book is obviously the same size, and there are just like a million more things going on. And it just made it so unreadable for me. You know, just months and months of nothing happening, and then all of a sudden there's something episodic, and a lot of them didn't really like mesh together. At some point she's skating. Like, I don't know, I'm gonna rag on the skating for a while. It doesn't connect to something that happened chapters ago where there was literally a war. They're in a war and it doesn't fucking matter. She gets kidnapped and rescued, and that's it. That's a lot of what happens in this book. Each adventure is Alana getting kidnapped or hurt in some way and being rescued. There are a few things that are written in and out when they're needed, but not really explained, not really set up. For example, at the very beginning of the story, of the second book, mind you, she comes in contact with a spider and she's like, I've always hated spiders. Didn't hear anything about that in the first book, right? Very, very end of this book, she's like facing all of her fears in a magic trial thing, and there's a spider, and she's like, oh my god, I've always hated spiders. There's not been a single spider mentioned since the first fucking chapter. She's being dared to skate across a frozen pond, and she's like, I haven't skated since I was 5 and I almost drowned because I fell through. And then she's skating and she falls through and she's like, oh no, just like when I was 5. I have to explain my biggest discomfort with this book was the relationship. 2 people learn that she is a girl by the end of the first book. Sorry, spoilers. She meets one of them. His name is George, and he is like the king of thieves. So he rules the underground ne'er-do-wells of the city. She meets him when she is 10 and he is 17. She also meets Jonathan, who is the prince and is also in night school. She becomes friends with Jonathan and all of his friends. Both of them learn that she's a girl by the end of the first book. Immediately in the second book, they are into her sexually. This is full rant spoilers. I'm sorry, I have to rant about this. It's been like a month since I've read this book and I'm still like so grossed out by it. Over the entire book, she's like, I don't want to marry, I don't want to be in love, I don't want to do any of that. I don't want to kiss you, I don't want to touch you, I don't want you to kiss me. And they will not stop harassing her about it. And the thing is, she's 15, he's like 22. Sir, step away from her, please. I hated it. I really hated it. There's a point where George, like, she's carrying a bunch of things and George kisses her and literally says, I'm taking advantage of you at this point specifically because you can't push me away. She would like say no and then he would kiss her and she'd be like, please don't kiss me. And then he would kiss her again. Anyway, I was texting my group chat about this and I was like, this is making me so uncomfortable. He's so much older than her. I really don't like it. And then I was like, her other love interest is also older than her, but like at least he's not kissing her all the time. And right as I sent that, Jonathan kissed her. And she was also like incapacitated. I don't think she was unconscious, but she was injured. Anyway, it was a whole thing. I think what makes me so uncomfortable is that it's immediately physical intimacy that they are craving and wanting from her. I feel like if it was more emotional, I wouldn't feel as uncomfortable, but because she like turns marrying age, suddenly they are demanding physical intimacy from her. Not emotional intimacy, physical intimacy. And she continuously says no, and they continuously badger her about it. There's one point where she's like dressed up as a girl because she's just trying to feel okay being a girl again. John, the nicer of the 2 love interests, John, oh my God, John like starts taking off her blouse, like unstrapping her blouse, and she's telling him, no, I'm not here, not with you, not now, I don't want this. He finally stops, thank God. And it says in the narration, her hands were shaking so much she couldn't do up her own blouse again. Like, that is supposed to be romantic, apparently. And the thing is, like, I can tell these are supposed to be tender moments, but to me, they're just not tender. And I don't know if maybe if I were 13, 14 reading this, would I be as uncomfortable? Because I think if I were 13 or 14, I would be reading this and being like, oh my God, an older boy's into her, that's so cute. But like now, as a 25-year-old, I'm like, step away from that child, please. I don't know, I kind of cringe just at any kind of like physical intimacy, but she like finally lets herself be loved. So So she's like, during the day, she was learning how to be a knight. And then at night, Jonathan was teaching her how to love. I hated it. I don't even think that's the full quote, but I was like, that is disgusting, guys. I hated that. Like, the magic didn't even make sense because I have no idea that, like, Alana has magic. Her brother apparently is one of the most powerful sorcerers ever, but I have no idea what their limits are. I don't know how magic exists in this world. Sometimes they're healers, sometimes it's destructive. Like, I don't know. Jonathan is a magic user and he's gonna be king, and I don't know how it changes the kingdom now that their king is a magic user. Like, it doesn't make any sense. I did look up the Wikipedia summaries of the next 2 books because I wanted to see who she ended up with, and I think she ended up with the wrong person. And I know I would have hated the last 2 books. So I canceled my Libby holds because of the second book. I was like, I'm not finishing this series. This is awful. I hated it. I'm so sorry. The first book was fine. I probably would have rated it like 4 stars. Second book was just awful. Moving on to Impossible Creatures by Katherine Rundell. Pick this up because it has a blurb on the cover by none other than K.A. Applegate, the author of the Animorphs and other books she still is currently writing, but I can't leave the Animorphs alone. And she said it was a great book, so I hold her opinion in high esteem, and she hasn't disappointed me yet. The real world exists alongside a magical archipelago. I don't know how to say it. In this magical world, magic exists, some people can wield it, but it's mainly focused on like magical creatures. So like griffins, unicorns, dragons, serpents, krakens, all of that kind of stuff. Our main characters are Christopher, who is a boy from the real world who gets sucked into the magical world. He comes from a long line of guardians, so I think that's the reason he's able to go into the magical world. And then Mel, who's a girl from the magical world, and she is like an animal activist. She really loves them. She's one of the first to notice that things are not quite right with the animals. We're finding a lot of animals not in their natural habitats, who are like migrating weirdly, who are acting weirdly. Just a lot of parallels to like climate change and the effects of climate change on animals and animal behavior that we're seeing in today's world. Story-wise, it is a bit hard to follow because it is a quest novel. We're focused on quest. And because it's an archipelago, we are going from island to island, picking up ingredients, information, saving people, just kind of flitting from island to island, which is just a bit hard to follow, especially as an audiobook. I loved the messaging. I loved that it was very blatantly about parallels to climate change and climate activism, and the difference between turning your back on it and being willfully ignorant versus accepting that you have a hand in it and taking steps to improve that. And it's a bit sad. It made me cry, but it is a book that I would give to my nieces, so there's that. The next 2 are DNFs, and I don't even know if I should talk about them, but I will. I read Watermoon by Samantha Soto Yambao, or Yambao. This is a surrealist fantasy about a woman who owns a pawn shop, but this pawn shop is not real. They don't pawn gold or watches or old appliances. They pawn specifically regrets. The day she is set to inherit the pawn shop, she finds it ransacked, and usually people only come to the pawn shop when they need help, and they like come here without realizing it. But then she answers the door and it's a guy asking if he can help her, and he's just like special and different. I DNF'd this about 50% of the way through, not completely 50. I think it was like 47-ish, I don't know. It was an audiobook and it was just very hard to follow. Again, maybe audiobooks just are harder to follow for me, I don't know. It's like a fish out of water story. Not a fish out of water character, we have one of those, but the reader is the fish out of water and we're dragged from place to place. And when the like normal character is asking questions about these places and about like the weirdness of it and like the physics of it, the main character is like, don't ask questions, like this is just how things are, what are you talking about? Which I never like. I find dream worlds to be kind of boring when it maybe I just don't like surrealism. I don't know, maybe I don't. I don't believe the characters had any chemistry. I don't know if I'd call it a romance, but they do start like kissing at a certain point, and I'm like, why? Are you guys just kissing to kiss? Because there's no like chemistry here. There's nothing. You guys just met each other. Stop it. I really don't understand anything about the characters like themselves. Keishan is nice and he's a scientist, and that's it. Hannah lost her mom, and that's kind of all I know about her. The next book I DNF'd at like, I don't even know, 17%? It was a quick DNF. It's called When the Moon Hits Your Eye by John Scalzi, I think. This is absurdist sci-fi about a world in which the moon suddenly turns into cheese. And I thought that was so cool. I thought it would be like a humorous, existential book. And I think it is supposed to be. It just wasn't my kind of humor. I hate to say it, but they focus too much about the moon being cheese. I kind of thought the moon would just be cheese and we'd move on and talk about like humorous existential dread. Maybe we would later, but we lingered so much on the physics of cheese. Like how they identified that the moon was cheese, like the mass of it, the fact that the mass of cheese can't sustain itself, that kind of stuff. I got super bored super quick. It was kind of dry. It almost reminded me of The Martian, the way The Martian was written, just the dryness of it with the humor of the character interactions, which is great, but like outside of the dialogue, the dryness was so hard to get through that I just decided it wasn't worth it. My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite. This is a short novel or a novella. I don't know if it fits the novella requirements, but it's a short, like 4-ish hour audiobook, and it's a psychological thriller about the older sister covering for her younger sister who is a serial killer. We learn about the lengths the older sister will go to cover her younger sister's crimes. This is set in Nigeria, and I believe the author herself is Nigerian, and so we get a little bit of a discussion, a little bit of a look into certain topics, classism and colorism and pretty privilege in Nigerian culture, but it's not like a think piece about that, you know? It's just kind of like a little bit of an insight to it. We talk about like the cycles of abuse and how if you grew up learning to forgive abuse, you're gonna start forgiving worse things over and over again. I really like the dynamic of the sisters because it's a very toxic dynamic. The older sister is less desirable because she's less attractive, even though she's like a good person and like would die for her sister, you know? So just because her younger sister is prettier, lighter, shorter, like the perfect ideal of a woman, she gets away with so much, and the older sister gets blamed for everything. And there was a quote that was like, if my younger sister dropped a glass of water, I would be blamed for giving her the glass. I thought that was such a good explanation of their dynamic and just like a simple paragraph. It really encapsulated what we were talking about when it came to the toxicity of their relationship. It was pretty slow for such a short novel. Like it's not a slog to get through. It's not like hard to push through. It is just not super thrilling. So I wouldn't call this a thriller, even though I think I did. It's not like action, action, action all the time. We are getting to the last book, and I read Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, which I also have a physical copy of, but I'm not gonna go get because it's downstairs. It took me a month to read this book, and not because it was like really thick. It's really just because I would pick it up, put it down, pick it up, put it down. Wuthering Heights is about a family that is bad for each other. There's not one single good character in this book. Everyone sucks. The framing around it is a person he has rented a house that is on the estate of Wuthering Heights, or it's owned by the person who owns Wuthering Heights. And he goes there and he has a very bad experience with the landlord, Mr. Heathcliff. And so he is talking to his servant, maid, I don't know what she is, and he's like, what's up with that guy? And she's like, let me tell you about it. So she tells their entire childhood, how the family came to adopt Heathcliff, how Catherine and Heathcliff are like best friends, twin flames. They don't use that word, but that's what it is. Catherine and Heathcliff are just these amazing toxic love interests, and I love it. And that part of the book was amazing. I really, really enjoyed it. I was told there were ghosts, and there is, technically. Not as many ghosts as I thought. And then also, not to spoil, you know, a 150-year-old book, I don't know how old it is, but Catherine dies about halfway through, and then the rest of the book is her daughter and Heathcliff's son and their relationship and how they came to be married, so that Heathcliff Sr. owns both estates. That was where it got really boring, and I was like, I don't care. I wanted to learn about Catherine Sr. and Heathcliff Sr. and figure out what made them tick, why they were awful to each other, their passionate romance, by the way, passionate. And the first half of it was very fun and easy to read, and I enjoyed it. I was very engaged with it. And then it just sucked. Sorry, Emily, it sucked. Did I learn anything from this classic novel? No. Am I a better person because I've read the book? No. Am I better than everyone who hasn't read Wuthering Heights? Absolutely. So there you have it. Oh my god, it is not late, but it's like 10. I've been talking for a while. Hopefully this is more coherent than my last video. All right, that's gonna be it for me. Okay, bye. Sorry.